how do I explain what's happening to me, with people, with coworkers, with my boss? Like what does that look like? Endometriosis is so invisible, and so it's like people can't see it. The goal is that you don't feel so alone, that you don't feel like your experience is so isolating. There's sort of three levels of like disclosure about your endometriosis that I think might sort of help. You may have noticed that I sometimes miss work or might have to miss work. It's because of something that I have, a chronic disease called endometriosis, which you may have heard about. And this is how it impacts me. Today I thought I would share a bit about my experience managing my endometriosis at work. Something that I'm definitely passionate about because I have over the years had different jobs in different sort of settings where I've with each job had to sort of figure out how am I gonna manage my endometriosis here. It's like, I'm sure if you have endometriosis, like you dealing with that at work, it is probably like a pretty significant stressor because it continues to be a big stressor for me in my life of, trying to figure out how do I actually manage the pain, but more so like how do I explain what's happening to me, with people, with coworkers, with my boss? Like what does that look like? I'm just sharing this today as a person, like a fellow peer with endometriosis who has had to do this many times in my life. And I just want to sort of open by saying, like, there is no right or wrong way to talk about endometriosis in the context of your work environment. And that I think everybody has different levels of comfort and openness. I mean, we're talking about something that's like very personal, has to deal with your menstrual cycle. And not that it should be personal, like menstruation is like a very normal, natural thing. But I also say that, but I also know it doesn't always feel like it is, right? I'm gonna kind of lay it out like this. I think there's kind of like three, the mild, the moderate, the severe. Maybe it's not the way, like maybe I shouldn't say it like that. It's like, there's sort of three levels of like disclosure about your endometriosis that I think might sort of help guides. Like the first is like, being, is not giving away, the first level is like, just sort of saying to an employer, you may have noticed that sometimes I'm sick and away from work. And I wanted to let you know that I have a chronic disease that impacts my health and my wellness that sometimes disables me from getting into work. And so if you'd like some more information, like please let me know, or if you'd like a note from my doctor, please let me know. That's the more like kind of guarded, like more not, as specific sort of way of explaining it. Next level, you could drop the E word, you could drop the endometriosis word. So you could say again, you may have noticed that sometimes I'm away from work, or you may notice, like if you're telling your employer, like before you start working, I wanted to share with you that there may be times that I'm away from work, and I wanted to share that I have a chronic disease called chronic illness, chronic disease, both can work, called endometriosis. And you may have heard about endometriosis before or not. Feel free to research more about endometriosis if you're curious, because I feel like I think it really helps people. If they're curious and they want to know, they'll look it up and then they can do their own learning about it, right? And so you can say, it's called endometriosis, you may have heard about it. And what that means is that some days I'm able to manage the pain, because mostly how I experience this is that I have severe pain. And most days I'm able to manage it, or sometimes I'm able to manage it. But there are many days, or some days, or a few days, whatever it feels like, where I'm not able to manage my symptoms. And it's really important for me on those days to take care of my health and to stay home. And so it might mean that I'm not able to come into work that day. So, let me know if you need any more information, or if you need a note from my doctor. That's kind of like more in between. And then like the third option is like really sort of being like, depending on your relationship with your employer, you could say something that is, you may have noticed, those same sort of setup, you may have noticed that I sometimes miss work or might have to miss work, it's because of something that I have, a chronic disease called endometriosis, which you may have heard about. And this is how it impacts me. It impacts me with severe pain, with severe cramping, sometimes having GI issues as well, extreme fatigue. And so these are, I'm taking medication that helps with some of these symptoms, but not all of them, like sort of that's like the more like really open-ended sort of one where you can really describe to somebody. And maybe you will choose, if you choose, to use that option if you need to describe really how it might work in your specific job. So maybe there's like, you have like a physical job where like you physically have to like lift things or move things or, even like wear something, I don't know, like a uniform that might actually be like really uncomfortable for you. So I don't know what the answer is to that, but like talk about how your endometriosis might impact that aspect of your job, right? And think about like what you need. Like, not that we're always going to get everything that we need from other people, but to at least sort of say like what would really help is to have some more flexibility around this, or, for me to know, for you to understand that it may not look that I'm actually sick. It's not like I have a flu. It's not like I'm going to be coughing and sneezing. It's actually quite invisible. But what I need from you is, understanding or flexibility. I mean, again, depends on, you may not want to say like what I need from you, like in like an interview, but there may be some practical ways of sort of helping your employer say like, this is one struggle that I'm up against when I'm dealing with endometriosis at my work, is that this can be an issue, right? For me, in my experience, I can talk about my first job. And so, just in case I haven't mentioned this before, I am a social worker. I have a master's degree in social work with a clinical focus. And I previously worked in more healthcare settings and now work actually in private practice. So I can kind of speak to at least two different sort of work worlds, one being in like a more public healthcare system and now managing my endometriosis in private practice, although I still work with a group of people. So I'll go to that after. But working my first job as a professional, like after completing my master's degree and working in a hospital, my first job was actually working as a social worker in the intensive care unit. And I did that for a year as like a year contract. And then I was able to get a full-time position as a social worker in the pediatric intensive care unit at a children's hospital in Hamilton, Ontario. I have always felt, so this is where it's like, this may not feel right for you. But I'm just generally like, my personality is like, I'm fairly open with people. I don't feel like I'm a very private person. So in some way that has made some of my ability to talk about things like periods and pain and that sort of thing has been like a little easier for me to do. So I decided pretty much like right out the gate when I was hired that and again, this is totally, I'm gonna probably keep saying this, so I apologize, but like, this may not be the right thing for you. But I, at that time of my life, was in my early 20s, and my endometriosis like has always been severe, but it was just truly in a time where it was just like every month I was, down at least 1 to 2 days in the month where I was just like the pain was just so bad. I just couldn't even move, like nauseous, pain, everything. And so I decided that even in my interview that I wanted to share about my endometriosis, because I wanted to know like the anxiety that it would have caused me to be like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Like my first month of my job when I like potentially have to call in and like not make it to work. What am I going to do? And so I just thought, for me, I felt like me sort of really being upfront and communicating about my disease with like my endometriosis was the best sort of choice for me. So here I am in an interview, going through the whole interview, like feeling good about it. And they sort of say, is there anything else? Or do you have any questions? This is going to be asked a question. And then at the end, I just said something like this, I just wanted to be really transparent. And I know that you as an employer, don't need to know this, but I'm choosing, so I'm like using that word, I'm choosing to let you know that I have a chronic disease called endometriosis. And maybe you've heard of it or maybe not, and feel free to, research it or look it up if you're curious to know more about what endometriosis is. But what I want to share with you is that, I typically I have like really severe pain during specific times of the month. And because that is true for me, it's not every day, it's during these times. And so I have really severe pain during specific times in the month, and I'm sometimes able to manage that pain, and sometimes I'm not able to manage the pain. And on days that I can't manage the pain, it's sometimes best for me to just stay home and rest. And so I just want to be open and honest about that I do my best to manage my pain, to be very on top of it, and to really just sort of really know when I need to make that call. And so I wanted to share with you because it may mean sometimes that I have to call in and I'm not able to actually come into work. And it may seem odd because the day that I come back, I may not seem like I'm sick. I may not have a cold or a cough. I may not be limping around, but I have been, dealing with a lot of pain. So I sort of say that just because I know, like, it's like another thing that's like, endometriosis is so invisible. And so it's like people can't see it, right? So it's like you kind of like are sick one day at work or you leave and people are like, I don't get it. Like, you don't seem sick, right? But like, that's one of the big challenges with endometriosis. This is a chronic illness. It's like very invisible, but it's very real. So I've basically chosen to do that with basically every job I've ever had. And again, that may not be the right thing for you. You may want to just manage it. Your pain might be different, probably is different than mine. You may have more severe pain more days of the month. You may not have pain, with every period. So it may be the kind of thing where you're like, what? And just to sort of say with that, like your employer doesn't have, I don't know, like the right language, but like your employer doesn't have a right to access like your personal health information. Like you have a right to maintain your privacy around your health. And I've been very aware of that. And I think that for some people, they want to keep that very separate and they don't want to share about their endometriosis in that way. And that's totally okay. And for me, it's just been a matter of me feeling like it is the right thing and feeling like I know that me sort of being upfront will sort of mitigate some of my own, anxiety and worry. And it was not to say that anytime that I've had to call in sick because of my endometriosis, that it has not been hard. Because even with me setting up my employer in that way, like my boss, my supervisor, that they sort of know that, it still is that feeling where you're like, there's no cure for endometriosis. And so it sucks when I have to pick up the phone and, and sort of word my way through it when I'm calling in to say, hey, it depends on how your workplace is set up. You may have like a call system that you have to call into and you don't actually talk to a real person. You might talk to, your direct supervisor and maybe somebody else that you talk to. And so I think, I say this and haven't always done this, but I think kind of finding like pre-planning a bit of a statement or sort of paragraph around like what you want to say when the illness is around endometriosis, it's really good. And so I think something like, I'm not coming into work today. My chronic disease has flared up. I'm in too much pain to come in. Or you can just say, I'm dealing with my endometriosis, or I'm having an endometriosis flare-up. I mean, maybe even flare-up might not feel right because it just could be your period, right? But it could just be that, I have a chronic illness and I'm not well. I'm not well enough to come into work today. So just sort of finding words that feel right for you and like making a note in your phone. I was gonna say your iPhone, whatever phone you have. Make a note in your phone so that when you make the call, I think part of like the anxiety thing is like, what am I going to say? How am I going to explain it? Right. but I think having that sort of ready to go will kind of help take off that distress for you, right? And so beyond that, in terms of your colleagues, right, that's another choice for you in terms of whether or not you want to share about your endometriosis or not. It depends on the kind of work that you do. So for me, being a social worker, really having this team dynamic where I'm working closely with nurses and RTs and doctors and pharmacists and physiotherapists, and there's this team sort of environment, I just felt like, there were, I would kind of like just determine for myself, like, I feel like there's a couple of people that I've kind of connected with and making a choice. So it's your choice. You get to decide what you do with it. But I have in the past and currently chosen to tell a couple of my colleagues about my endometriosis. Typically with my colleagues, I've waited. Like I've tended to sort of tell my employer or supervisor fairly early on because they're the ones who are going to be really noticing like my absence. But I have also kind of then from there decided to sort of share about my endometriosis with a couple of people. And I've been lucky, although you would think like everybody in healthcare, knows what endo, but it's not the case. And so, but I have had, people here and there who are like, oh yeah, I know about endo. Oh, wow. Like that's really painful and that's really hard. And so, that's always like a bit of like a blessing when that happens because you just feel like, okay, somebody sort of gets it. But just to know not everybody is going to get it, and to try to tell yourself there will be some people who will be understanding and empathetic and others who just may still be empathetic but may forget or may not really get it. And that's okay. It's not your responsibility to make them get it, because ultimately, like the goal is that you don't feel so alone, that you don't feel like your experience is so isolating. I mean, yes, in the sense that somebody who may not have the shared experience where they're like, I have endo too, but they may just be able to sort of understand and be able to be a bit more compassionate or be empathetic, So I would encourage you to like look at your workplace, sort of look at, what that might look like for you to sort of let somebody in. Another just like little quick sort of thing with that too is like, you may also want to think about, because like when I used to work in the hospital, it was like our unit clerk who I would typically talk to, and I would like have to call in. And so I'd have to like notify her that I, wasn't going to be coming in. So like that was another person. I was like, this is a person who's regularly going to be getting the call. Like who's going to be the one on the other end of that line regularly getting the call, like once a month for me, or usually once a month, sometimes not every month, especially if I got my period like on the weekend. But who is that going to be? And so how can I kind of create a bit of like a plan around that so that I don't have to feel so like anxious or like, what are they thinking? Or, do they believe me? Like kind of making a plan around that is maybe a good idea. And so just to kind of fast forward to now. So now I work, with a counseling group out in Vancouver. And so technically it is not, it's not an employee-employer relationship. I technically am like my own boss, but I still work with a team of people, and we have admin staff who does all of our bookings, like for clients, who takes calls, who makes bookings, who cancels clients for us, etc. And so, when I was first like hired with this sort of group, again, it was like a moment where I was like, because I just started doing this job about 2 years ago after I had my daughter and didn't want to go back to work full time. And so here I was like back from mat leave, sort of, having to explain my endometriosis, or not having to, but like choosing to say, okay, it's another new workplace. And this is a person, like now there's the pressure too of like, how is this going to work for me when, I have clients who are paying out of pocket. It's like a private organization. So people it's not being covered through like the public system through healthcare. It's like people are paying to see me. And how am I going to like be able to maintain a practice if I'm regularly, missing work? So done a couple of things with that. And one is that I have let our admin staff, our front desk, sort of know about my endometriosis. So again, hey, do you have a minute? I just want to share something with you. that I have a chronic disease called endometriosis, and it causes a lot of pain for me. And so what that means is that typically, once a month, the pain impacts me so severe that I'm just not able to see clients. I'm not able to come into work. And so it's something that is, has been ongoing, and I have lots of great medical care, and I have a team that follows me. But I just wanted to make you aware, because it may mean that some days I need to, that I won't be able to be here. And so, your awareness of this, and, feel free to, look up more about endometriosis. I always kind of give people that option in terms of, if they are curious about it, they can ask me, or they can also just look it up. And sort of read a bit more about it. And so just saying, like, this is kind of how it impacts me, and that it may mean that I sometimes need to cancel my clients, right? So again, just like what feels right for you. And kind of like the last thing is just, in the rare event that maybe you're someone who's like me, who's self-employed, who like, also, what does this mean for like my clients, right? Because it's like, now we're in like a different situation where they're my clients, like I'm their therapist. And so what do I do with that, right? Because like, what if I have the same client who's coming in like once a week, or every other week sort of thing, and like once a month I'm like, oh, I can't come in, right? So again, I think this is like a really personal choice. And I think I don't do this across the board with all of my clients. But if it's happened to me where I've had to cancel a client more than once, like the second time I've been like having to call, and I've missed work that day, depending on the client, I typically will share with somebody, with a client, and say, I just wanted to share with you, because I realized like I had to cancel on you in our last session, and I really apologize for that. And I just want to let you know that I do have a chronic disease called endometriosis. Maybe you've heard of it or not. Sometimes it kind of can cause a lot of pain for me, and that I'm just not able to be here. And it's really important for me as, your therapist, your counselor, that, that I'm really present here for you, and that I'm well, so that we can, engage in our sessions together and work together. And so I'll sort of say that, and then I'll just sort of say, and so sometimes it means that that this may come up again, and this will happen, and I really apologize for that. And I just sort of let clients know, because often, like, people are like, oh, are you okay? And like, they're so caring, and it's like, I so appreciate your care for me, and your empathy, and I really appreciate that. And I want you to know that you don't need to worry about caring for me. I have a great team who follows me, and that I will be able to know when it's a day that I just can't be here. And so you don't need to worry about whether or not I'm okay or not okay. Because I do that because sometimes clients have this, like, if they're dealing with an issue where they're kind of really trying to caretake other people in their life, I don't want them to feel like they have to caretake for me, right? So I really set up that boundary really clearly, that you don't need to worry about me, that you can trust that I will be able to determine what I need. And if I'm here, I'm good to be here, So that's kind of like how I do it with clients. And I've had like just really positive interactions, and it just actually, even being away as a therapist, I know people have like, if you are a therapist, you happen to be a therapist with endometriosis and watching this, we need to be friends. But I think like, even that style may not work for you as a therapist. You may have much more, your boundaries may look different, that, you really don't disclose anything. But I just think sort of with how I am as a person and my style with clients, is that I feel like that's something that is a really supportive thing for me. It enables me to actually just like function really well and to be a good therapist. So whatever you feel is right for you is right for you. These are just a couple of ways that I have dealt with talking about endometriosis at work. I hope that kind of helps. I don't really talk too much about like actually managing like the pain at my work. There is like, I have 2 videos that talk about like managing pain just in general, and managing pain when traveling. And so some of those like ones that are more like traveling oriented, I use at work. So like I do have like smaller rice bags that I use at my work now, that I kind of like sneak on my back before I start a session. staying on top of pain medication. Again, I have a video talking about like clothing and endometriosis. And so knowing that I have certain clothes that are work professional that I can wear, but that are a bit more comfortable and put more ease on my pelvic area. And I make sure that those clothes are ready in the event that I'm able to get to work while I'm dealing with endometriosis and it's not bad enough that I'm still able to get to work. But I have some like clothes that are like ready for me. So, and just a reminder kind of with that too, is that, you're not alone in your experience in there being some days at work when like, another thing I've shared with employers that kind of on this note is that sometimes I just need to take the time in the morning because my pain typically is worse in the morning because when you think about it, like I haven't taken any pain medication through the night. I wake up, as we know, like pain, if you're not on top of it, it kind of has to catch up. So often my pain can be like really bad in the morning, but sometimes by like noon, I'm like, I actually feel well enough to go into work and I don't want to like lose a whole day. And especially now I don't have sick time, whereas before in the hospital I had sick time. So it's like, sometimes you want to have that. That's what I mean, like with flexibility, like with your employers, like maybe just saying like, some days I may be able to come in by noon and it's kind of a hard thing because how could you be sick for only half a day? But that is the nature of endometriosis, is that pain can really change, right? Pain can really change and can be kind of up and down. So kind of know if you're one of those people who your pain can even change like throughout the day significantly, make space for that with your employer. Talk about how that may be a thing that sometimes it's just a half day that you need, Feel free to sort of comment with, questions or just share your own story or your own experience about how you've sort of what you've sort of done to sort of manage your endometriosis at work. And yeah, I just always believe that by like sharing our story and listening to other stories about, specifically even like around this in terms of work and endometriosis, that we increase connection with each other so that we're not so alone struggling with this disease, and that we can use our stories to sort of help and support each other. So I hope this was helpful. Please make sure to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel because I have lots more videos coming for you to share more about endometriosis. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.